All right, so today we're going to be practicing adding or subtracting fractions, especially fractions that have denominators that are not the same. So if you consider this problem, I have two denominators that are different. And whenever I'm adding fractions, it's really nice to have, we want common denominators. We really want common denominators. And simple example of that is if I'm adding 1/2 plus 3/2. Well, if I have 1/2 and I add 3/2 to it, that's really easy to say, well, 1/2 and 3/2 together is 4/2, right? It's really easy for me to do algebra when my denominators are the same. That's an example. So how do I get these denominators to be the same? Well, to do that, we need to understand the idea of a least common multiple. So a least common multiple, make a straighter line than that. Least common multiple is where we just take all the multiples of the numbers that we're dealing with. So here we're dealing with 2 and 10. So the multiples of 10 are 20, 30, 40, and so on, right? And 2 is 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and so on. Well, what is the smallest value that is a multiple in both of these lists? And it looks like I spot 10 in both of these lists. So 10 is my least common multiple, which means when I come back here later and I do this algebra, I have 3/2 plus 3/10. It would be really nice if I could get both of them to have a denominator of my least common multiple, which is 10. Well, what do I need to multiply the top and bottom by here to get 10 as a denominator? Well, what do you have to multiply 2 by to get 10? You have to multiply it by 5. Whenever I multiply a fraction, a denominator of a fraction, I also have to multiply the numerator by that same value so that the ratio stays the same. So 3 times 5 on the top is going to be 15 over 5 times 2 on the bottom is 10. And I already have a denominator of 10 here. So I can just rewrite that as 3/10. So 15 over 10 plus 3 over 10, well, 15/10, and I add 3/10, that means I have 18/10. But that's not the final answer because 18 and 10 have a common divisor. What is that common divisor? Well, they both have 2. Is there a higher one? No, 2 and 5 is the only divisors for 10. So if I divide top and bottom by 2, my common divisors, simplifying this ratio, would give me a ratio of 9/5. So my answer here, 3 over 2 plus 3/10 is equal to 9/5. Okay? And then same thing over here. We want to look at getting common denominators. So let's look at the least common multiple. Least common multiple of 2 and 3. Okay, so 2's multiples are 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. 3's are 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. And I recognize here that I have two sets of multiples that are the same, 6 and 12. But remember, we are dealing with the least common multiple. That's what that L means, least common multiple. So which one is the least? That is going to be 6. So we're not going to be dealing with 12 here because it would just be extra simplification at the end of the problem that we would have to do later. So let's go ahead and look at this. I have 1/2 minus 2/3. Now what do I need to multiply the top and bottom by to get it to my least common multiple of 6? Well, what do you multiply 2 by to get 6? That would be 3. What do you have to do to the denominator and the numerator? You have to multiply them by the same number. And then what would you multiply 3 by to get it to 6? Well, 3 times 2 is equal to 6. Okay, and then since I multiply the denominator by 2, I have to multiply the numerator by 2 also. Now we're just going to simplify this down. So 3 times 1 is 3 over 3 times 2, which is 6, minus 2 times 2, 4 over 3 times 2, which is 6. So if I have 3/6 and I take away 4/6, that's going to be negative 1/6, which is just negative 1/6. So my final answer, 1/2 minus 2/3 equals negative 1/6.